Welcome to Inside Photo Organizing, from DIY to Pro, with Allison Friedman from Arrange Wander Focus of Chicago, Illinois. And I am Susan Wallach from Save a Memory of Northern Colorado. Together, we will provide photo organizing tips and tricks for everyone from the person who wants to do it yourself to other pros in our industry. We'll discuss current software and hardware news about photo and digital asset management. We will be answering your questions, and we hope that as you learn more, you can complete your own photo organizing project and feel more confident to finally know, hey, I can find that special photo that I've been looking for. Well, good morning, Allison. Nice to see you again.
Good morning, Susan. Happy February. I forgot to check, but did the gopher see his shadow? Do you know?
Oh, I didn't see that on the news.
I know. I forgot to check that. We'll have to check after to know whether we can escape winter, because it's been very, very cloudy here in Chicago and kind of sad.
Well, I saw a post on Facebook and it made me laugh. Some social media posts are pretty darn funny. This one was the bearded ranger. And did the bearded ranger out of some national park see his shadow?
I saw that. That was Bighorn National Recreation Area. We were there a few years ago. It's beautiful. So if you haven't been there, you should go over there. That one was very funny.
So did the bearded ranger see his shadow? I didn't even read the post.
I don't know. I didn't read the post either. So I guess that's tells you something about how powerful social media is. Anyway, I am super excited today because we have a fellow Chicagoan with us. Her name is Lida Bunting, Lida with a D, Lida. I suspect, like me, she gets kind of annoyed when people mispronounce her name or misspell it. So I'll just put that out there. Anyway, she is a photo book expert. So our topic today is all about photo books. And I am going to let her tell us about herself, and then we'll get into it. So welcome, Lida.
Welcome.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Allison. I'm really excited to be here and talking about one of my favorite topics. Yes, I am from Chicago, but my heart is in Colorado. So I've got both a little bit of Susan and a little bit of Allison in me. I've been doing this I'm approaching my 8-year anniversary in March. And I started this business because of my love for getting photos off our devices and into printed books.
So you were an engineer before, though, weren't you?
Yeah.
So how'd you make that switch?
Yeah. So my career actually started in commercial construction. I got an engineering degree from Purdue, and I worked in my given field for 14, 15 years. So I managed construction projects, and then I moved, from city to city, working for different general contractors. And then after the birth of my second daughter, I was like, this construction thing it's not working. My work-life balance isn't where I want it to be, or I was stressed, and I'm like, I need to pull away. Like it wasn't for me. So instead of being home full time, I did find another position. I worked for a nonprofit for a few years. A nonprofit that I had done a lot of volunteer work for, and they hired me as an unpaid intern. And then after 6 months, they hired me full time. And it was while I was working there that I had my big aha moment of wanting to start and launch Znimka Creations.
I love it. I think we've all had those moments.
So did you have, this, like, what is your connection? Was it the photos, or were you like doing desktop publishing? Because I started out early on in the 90s doing desktop, actually in the 80s. I learned PageMaker, and that lit me up. So how did you get into the photo book specifically? Because that's like your thing.
Yeah, it is. So my very first photo book that I created with digital photos was actually our wedding album. We got married in 2007, and our photographer, his contract was that he would give us an album. Well, not give us, because we're paying a lot for it.
Yes.
And when I reached out to him and we were coordinating, we had like 300 people at our wedding, and he's like, oh, you can have 80 photos in your book. I was like, wait, what? 80 photos in my wedding album? Like, it was like an all-day affair. How am I going to find 80 photos? And so I was complaining about it to my husband. He goes, why don't you just make your own? I go, wait, I can do that. How do I do that? He goes, oh, there's like online software and you can make your own books. So I looked into it and just Googled, online books. And I didn't want, I wanted something a little bit more special than, a typical like photo cover. So I wanted like a finish, like a linen finish or with a cameo window. So I kind of started doing a little bit more research and I found a book publisher that I like that has since gone out of business. But that was my very first book. And I had always, as a kid, taken printed photos and put them into albums. I didn't want to look through envelopes of photos. I wanted them in a book so that I could open it and kind of see the story unfold. And so I just transitioned from doing it printed photos to digital photos.
Nice.
And we'll come back to some of that later. But before we get that far, so you sort of had this epiphany and you started your company. Can you tell us how you came up with the name? And I'm not going to say it because sometimes I butcher it and I don't want to get it wrong. So I want you to tell us the name of your company and tell us where the name comes from.
Yeah, so it's funny. I've had a couple of really close friends tell me that I should change the name of my company because it is so hard to say. So I pronounce it Znimka Creations. And anyone who has ever had to come up with the name of a company knows how hard it is because you want it to be unique. You want it to be something that's relevant to your business. You want it to be something that hasn't been taken already. And you want it to be memorable. And I couldn't come up with a name. And Photo Books by Lida just wasn't calling me. Like, I'm like, this is really lame. So I had this moment where I thought, oh, I know a second language. I speak Ukrainian. I wonder if there are any Ukrainian words that I could use. And growing up, the word Znimka is the word we use for photo. So directly translated, my company is Photo Creations. I create things with photos. And I Googled it, and of course it wasn't taken because nobody can spell it and nobody can say it. But it means something to me, and it's a good reminder of where I came from.
Nice. That's very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I love that because in our business, when I also had some issues coming up with a name because lots of things I thought of were taken or they're very close to something else. They all have photo in the title, this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And actually my family and people around me thought I was nuts for not having photo in the name, just like you don't. I was like, I really want to do something with my initials, but my initials are terrible. AWF, what's the first word you think of, right? I'm not even gonna say it. So I love it. Have you, and this is a little bit off topic, we didn't ask you this before, but do you ever have trouble with people that can't find you because they can't spell it or they misspell it?
I haven't had anybody say that to me. I mean,
maybe you wouldn't even know.
Yeah, right. I'm like, I don't know that they can't find me because they haven't told me so. A lot of what we do, and you two can probably relate to this, is through relationships and through personal referrals. So by that time, someone already has either the spelling of my first name. I mean, my first name's unique. And growing up, my last name, it had 10 letters, but only one vowel. So, I mean, I'm used to having people not be able to pronounce a portion of my name. So when I got married and changed my last name to Bunting, I'm like, well, that's easy. Now I need something else that's difficult. So no, I mean, nobody has complained. Like I said, I've had a few friends say your company name is too hard to pronounce and you need to change it. But other than that, nobody has said, oh, I had such a hard time locating you. I'm findable on every single social media channel. And I think,
well, now, yeah, because it's so unique, I'm sure, if they can just get ZM going, I think the rest.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But your background seems, similar to mine. My dad was Polish and he had 9 siblings, and there's still some last names in our Wallach was the easiest. There are some names on that side of the family that to this day I can't pronounce and I can't spell. I have to look it up somewhere. Yeah, so I can totally relate.
Some of those names are easier to pronounce when you're not looking at them. Like my name, I mean, it's Krinivsky. Well, just saying it's not that bad, but if you see it, it's all these letters and
it's the SCY or CYK.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the letters that get me.
Yeah, the funky letter combinations.
Yep.
Well,
which
we'll
is how
have,
my company name is ZNIM, like Znim. Like nobody says those letters together, but I do.
yeah. And for our listeners, we will have a direct link to your website in
Make
our
it
show
easy.
notes. So you don't have to go back and I'll say rewind, even though that's not the term anymore, to get the right spelling, because we will have it there for you.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So you had started to talk about how much you liked the actual physical feeling of the photos. And, today most things are digital. It's just so easy and everybody, that's where everyone's focus is. But what are the benefits, do you think, of going analog, going old school?
Right. Well, I love the textile. I love tangible. So, first and foremost is you can sit down and look through something, look through these photos. So often we pick up our phones and we scroll. We scroll to go find that photo. We scroll past the good photos. We scroll past the bad photos. All we're doing is scrolling because we're on a mission to find that one photo that we're looking for. But a book helps us take it all in. We actually will sit down, we'll let the story unfold, and it allows us to understand what has happened, whether it's a vacation or a year in review or the wedding. And sometimes those stories are forgotten. I'm actually guilty of that. I recently did our 2021 year in review book. And as I'm going through it, I was like, oh, we went strawberry picking. Oh, that's right. We fell in a patch of strawberries and got, strawberry juice all over our legs. Oh, haha, that was so fun. And you just remember those moments that you would otherwise have forgotten. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing, that when our phones are, holding all of our photos, we just never see them and we forget. So, we've got the silly moments, we've got the special moments, you can look at them, but the books also, they last, they stand the test of time. They're on a shelf, they're on your coffee table. You don't need technology to look at them. So if my phone dies, I still have the book that I can pick up and look at it. And it's a memorable keepsake that you can then pass it down. My kids will hopefully have our year in review books when they're older. When I'm done with making these, or when I'm done with wanting them on my shelves, I can print each of them their own version of our year in review, and they can have it for themselves. So it's something that can be passed down from one generation to the next.
So that's a good point. So you have, is it 2 kids?
I do. Yep.
So do you print like 3 copies, one for you and then one each for the kids when you do these review books?
I used to. I used to print 2 of them, figuring that one, we would only need 2 in the end. Now I don't. I only print 1, but because of the way I design and where I design, I have a digital version of the entire book that could be reprinted in the future on a different printing capacity.
Yeah.
And
That's
I'm
good.
saving those as PDFs or as 2-page JPEGs, and they can, when they want them, I'll get them printed for them. I don't want them sitting around the house right now.
Yeah. Nice. That's a great idea.
Yeah, we do the same. There's the other thing that I really like about books, because I don't make as many as you, but I do a lot of travel books, and I will do it right away. I'm already working on the one from our past trip over the holidays. And the reason is because in a book, like you said, the photos tell a story in there just by themselves, and the way that you decide the order and how you're going to view them tells a story. But in a book, you can also add written words in a way that you just can't with digital photos. I talk to clients all the time about adding captions to important photos, but to see that caption, you have to swipe up or you have to do something. It's not in your face like it is in a book.
Right. Like I said, this 2021 book that we just had printed, we had moved to Colorado for the month of March because it was still kind of COVID life. And so we were doing hybrid school. Well, we ended up having some car trouble, and there was a huge snowstorm, go figure, in Colorado in March, and we got stranded. And we couldn't make it up the mountain. So we had to backtrack and go to a hotel, and the kids had to do e-learning from this hotel room, and we had our dog with us, and my father-in-law had to come get us. And it's all captioned in the book, because if you just look at the pictures, it's like, oh, they're driving through the mountains. Well, no, he had to come get us. We had to load the kids. We had to commute to their house during their lunch hour because they were on break and they were in school. So there's a story. There's always a story, but you need to capture that with the words.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So what kind of books do your clients ask you to create?
So I've done everything from year in review books, baby books, wedding books, bar and bat mitzvah books, grad books, family history books. There's pet books. I've done, dog books. A client wanted to gift her dog walker a book of the dog as she was retiring. So really anything goes, but I do have some favorites that I would love to talk about.
Yeah.
Sure.
Allison, you were just talking about vacation. I mean, vacation books are so fun to create, especially when I'm creating them for clients, because I get to see so many fun things that my clients get to do. And I'm like, ooh, I'm going to bookmark that and I'm going to do that someday. And oh, I want to go to that place. And then weddings. I mean, I think weddings are so beautiful and you're dealing usually with professional photos and they're beautiful. So it's just a great way to see how these happy moments can come together in a book.
I actually just created a wedding book, albeit it's been a few years since their wedding and they have 3 kids now, if that tells you anything about timing. But I was not their professional photographer. I was a guest. But I captured the wedding from my point of view, sitting in my chair, taking pictures of their ceremony, and then what I know in my life that has happened and that I appreciate is when I have a large event, whether it's something that I've set up or I'm attending, is that you can't always remember where, even though you assigned, like in a wedding, you assigned everybody, to be at table 10 or whatever, and who came. When it's your event, sometimes you don't get to interact with those people, in the way that you would like. And so I went around and I captured everybody sitting at their tables, just went around and got them to smile for me and took a bunch of pictures. And so when I created the book, I wanted to try out some textured cover, as you said, like a linen or something. And I took so many pictures. I wanted to document, like you said, 80 pictures is not enough to document a wedding. So I could totally relate. I had taken close to 1,000 that one day. And so to get it down to just enough to give them a taste of what happened, plus include, all the table shots, it was, I think, maybe 200 pictures. I don't remember now, but I did have to review it several times to get it down to a reasonable cost, because this was my gift to them. And but they absolutely loved it. And I wasn't there when my friend gave it to them, but she recorded a little video for me, which I was able to watch. And I loved it as they were flipping the pages and went, oh, that's so nice. She got everybody at the tables,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the things that, when you're the bride and groom, you may not get a chance to go around to every single table, yeah. And so, and unfortunately, some of the people that attended 5 years ago, have passed on. So, again, capturing those moments when you can, and then putting it in a nice, book to display moving forward is, I think, just a great gift, whether it's the professional photos from the photographer, or you maybe even collect photos from the guests that attended. That would be a great idea too.
Well, like I said, my very first book was my own wedding book, and it is a combination. It's a combination of the photographer's photos, and then people had sent me photos because it's different perspectives. And my book is probably 100 pages because I really wanted to capture the whole day and all the people that were there. So there's some goofy pictures, and then there's the professional ones that look amazing.
That is a great point. I was actually going to ask you about that, is how do you balance? Like, some people think, well, my pictures aren't good enough to put in a book. They're just bad, iPhone photos are not even in, focus or something. So how do you, like, what would you say to someone that says, no, my picture, they're not professional, they're not great pictures, but you can still make a book out of those, right? And you can still
Oh,
balance those.
for sure, 100%. My books, especially like my year in review books and my vacation books, I am not a professional photographer. My husband isn't either. But what's important to us is the story. And we have blurry photos, we have out of focus, we have maybe the lighting isn't always great. And for my own personal books, I don't necessarily color correct or do any of that because I'm just trying to get it done, right? I mean, done is better than perfect. And when you have a family or you're busy and you want to capture that story, you want to gift this to someone, get the photos into the book. No one is going to judge and say, oh, that picture's not a professional photo. What's important is the people that's in the picture, the story that it's telling, and the memories. I pick up my photo books and they bring me joy. They bring me some tears sometimes because I'm seeing people that are no longer around. But to me, what's important is getting the photos in, not the quality of the photo.
Yeah. And sometimes the non-professional ones bring the most laughs. The professional ones are beautiful. Of a wedding or a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, of course, you're going to have those because they do capture, I think the professional photos at events like that really help capture the amount of time and energy you put into creating that event. But sometimes those candids from other people's phones where, they're off center and all that stuff add a lot more color to the event. So with that, let's get into some nitty gritty.
Okay.
About how you actually go about making your book. So let's start with, what tips do you have to create a compelling photo book?
Okay, well, my first tip is to take it easy. Like, don't put too much pressure on yourself. My first tip is a mindset tip. Like, when I said done is better than perfect, I mean it. Like, don't think that it has to be an absolutely perfect book because it doesn't have to be. And if you've never done a book, don't try tackling a huge book on your first try. Instead of saying, oh, I'm going to take all 4 of my kids and get books made for them from birth to 18, and I'm going to get it done by next month. No, go back to last summer's vacation to the lake house and make that book first. Start easy. But to get into like more the technical things of creating a compelling book, there's basically, I approach my books in 3 different categories. First is the selection process. You have to pick the photos that you're going to put into your book. So sometimes people use the heart function if they have, their photos in Apple Photos or Google Photos. You can star or favorite your photos. So that's a good starting point because if it's a favorite on your phone, it's probably book worthy. But if you don't do that and you're maybe on a PC or something, you can just create a folder of the photos that you want in a book. So selection is step 1. Then step 2 is the design of putting photos onto a page and laying it out and having that story kind of come together. I tend to do most of my books in a chronological order. So if I'm doing a year in review, then, there's a few pages of January, then a few pages of February, and, so on and so forth. So laying out the pages and the book is step 2. And then the step 3 is kind of figuring out the finishes of the book. Do you want the linen cover? Do you want the photo cover? Do you want thick pages? Do you want the thinner pages? And then ordering it so that, you've got all those decisions made and you can click through whatever vendor you're going through and choose how you want it to look as a final product. Did that answer the question?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course, we have more questions.
Okay.
Just because.
Well, I was going to say, I need to print that sign that perfect is the enemy of good, like all over in my office, because I get waylaid by picking the best, just that, when I last year, I had a fantastic trip. Actually, it was 2 years ago now. We're in 2024. I have to remember. 2 years ago, I went home, not home, but I went to Italy. It's my mother's home. She was born there. And then stayed a week with my Italian relatives and then toured Italy and Greece and the Adriatic. And I loved that trip so much. And I wanted to create a really nice photo book because I hadn't done that on my previous trips. But now that I'm doing this business, I wanted to do it for myself. And it was such a, a, a process to do it yourself. So do you have these sessions with your clients where you help them cull the images? Like, if I gave you 300, 500 images, would you help me cull them? Is that something you do?
I usually, my clients are like, I don't want it. Here are all my photos.
Oh,
Pick the photos that you think I should have in my book. Um, but I would for sure work with them if they wanted to be more in a DIY capacity. But most of my clients are very overwhelmed by the mass amounts of photos that they have from a vacation or from an event or throughout the
yeah.
year. And they just give me access to all of it and say, pick my photos.
But don't you think that's easier because you're not emotionally, you know, maybe tied to some of those images. So you can look at it like you are developing a story for them, right?
Yeah, 100%. I do look at it more objectively. And it's funny because sometimes people take photos in the portrait mode versus landscape. And sometimes it's almost the same exact picture, it's just the orientation of it. And when it comes to selecting, I might select both of those, knowing that we'll see how it lays out in the book. I will choose one over the other, but I'll pick them both during the selection process because I'm not sure how that page is going to be laying out in that moment. But I usually overpick and then I don't necessarily use all of them. And I will, if the client is kind of a little stressed about it, I will send them the selection and say, these are the photos I've selected. Is anything missing? Did I capture all the moments? Did I capture all the memories? Are you okay with these? And most times they're like, yeah, run with it. And sometimes people are like, no, I don't like the way I look in that picture, or there's an event that is on my phone. I didn't give it to you. I need to send you more pictures.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great approach. I like that. Yeah, sometimes I just want to hand off those kind of travel photo books, to somebody else that, isn't so tied to, the event because I could just fall in love with all of them because I took them.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of my issues, at least like for my personal year in review books. I'm usually a 2-volume book. I max out at the 100-page max. Although I now have a vendor that prints more than 100 pages, but I would have to do the 2 volumes just because I don't want to miss anything. And there was a few years ago, I missed like apple picking or something, and I reprinted the book because I was so upset that I had missed that event. And it was just like one spread, but I had to have it in the book because otherwise we would have forgotten about it. So
I think people have a lot of decision paralysis when they're trying to select their own photos. And it's what I've seen is not so much necessarily missing an event, but missing the problem is you take a group photo, and as everybody does now, whenever anybody takes a group photo, a selfie, or asks somebody else to do it, you get 10 of them. And I see clients getting hung up all the time on like looking at all 10 of those photos and trying to figure out which one is the absolute best. And of course, the problem is one of them is the best for one person and one of them is the best for somebody else.
mm-hmm.
So I think it's often a lot easier to hand that off because the reality is when we as photo organizers look at it and look at the photos as a whole, they're all pretty much the same, especially since everyone's standing in the same spot and someone just clicks the button 5 times. They're
Right.
literally the same photo. So it is a lot easier to just
Mm-hmm.
hand it off and say, you know what, can you do this for me? And it takes a lot of stress off. People get really stressed out about books, especially I think parents of younger children, where they think I have to have this book for every year of their life. But
And every kid.
and any parent of a young child knows how hard it is to get the actual time you need to create that.
Right.
So I think there's pressure there, and there shouldn't be. You don't have to have the book, or you do it if you have time, or you hire somebody like Lida or one of us to do it for you, because ultimately it's just great to have that thing. And whether you've done it and it's not quite perfect or somebody else has done it, it's still, as you said, done is better than perfect. You've got it in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the best things to keep in mind is what she said about once you're back, or even during your vacation, as you're sitting in the hotel at night, start favoriting the photos from the day and put them in a folder. And I have created, like, I'm on Apple platforms mostly, and so I create a note, an Apple note. And so I'll keep my day-to-day travel, what's been going on, just in a note, so that when I am ready to create that book, I've got them, I got the photos in a photo album that I've picked, and I've got the notes. So it's not such a big deal. But when you're talking about, looking back and creating a year, that can seem intimidating unless you do it in little chunks early on, right? Is that
Right.
what you suggest to your clients, to just kind of keep up with those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important. I mean, my mom used to say, "How do you eat an elephant?" And it's one bite at a time. So if people are looking at this entire huge project, it's going to be overwhelming. So taking it in smaller chunks and giving yourself some grace. We are all busy. We are all being pulled into 20 different directions. So, and a photo book isn't necessarily at the highest priority for most of us. Like, we have to feed ourselves, we have to feed our families, we have to pay the bills. I mean, there are things that are a little bit more pressing than creating a photo book. So it keeps getting pushed off to the side. But if you really want it, and it's something that, is on the back of your mind, then setting aside a little bit of time once a week, every couple of weeks, to just sit down and just power through it. Just put together a plan, and for an hour, go favorite your photos, or for an hour, pick a vendor, or for an hour, just do these things, and you'll make forward progress, and it'll get done.
So with all your engineering background, do you approach books in a very engineering way?
I feel like I do. I'm very systematic. I'm all into processes. I'm all into efficiencies. So yeah, it's the project manager in me that kind of pulls through this. I previously had like a chart with all my personal projects that I need to work on and what stage they were in, and I was like, okay, this is too much. I need to take it easy.
This is why people hire you to do it, though, for them.
Yeah, I hope so.
You talked a little bit, you've mentioned a couple times about vendors, things like that. What tools do you use when you're designing your books? And these are professional tools. And after we'll ask you about, what a DIY, somebody wants to do it themselves, might use. But what are the professional tools that you use?
So I use the Adobe suite of products. So I use Adobe Lightroom, and that's what I use to cull the photos. So it's a nice way to view a bunch of photos. And I happen to work on two screens, so I can see a bunch of thumbnails on one screen, and then it blows up on the other screen. So that if I'm comparing, group shot, and I'm looking through 10 photos, I can choose which one of the 10 is the best one for a book. And I do it pretty quickly through Lightroom. And then InDesign, Adobe InDesign is a design software that graphic artists use to design magazines and covers. Well, I use it to design my books. And I can customize the pages and add as much or as little text as I need to, because I don't use any pre-designed templates. So what I do in InDesign is completely custom. And then Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop is a tool to edit photos that need a little bit of enhancing.
Yeah. When you look at the tools today, I just have to say how much easier and less brain damage you have to go through in order to prep things that need to go onto a press. When I was younger in the 90s, in between, just chasing what I love to do, I was a graphic designer for a local print shop. And so I had to learn all the 4-color separations. So whenever you had a photo and people would even if it was just a simple, business card they would bring us, I'd have to shoot the card, right? Take a photo of it for the plate to get their design and everything. But we'd also have to do on the computer a lot of prep work and separate those into different, 4-color separation, CMYK, so that because the printer needed that as it was going down, adding the colors to the pages. So I don't know if you guys would remember, but like magazines, there would be 4 passes, right? Cyan, yellow, magenta, and black, and they had to line up all the marks, your margin marks, your crop marks, and everything. And it was just fascinating. And now you don't have to worry about any of that. Like a JPEG that comes out of your camera, you lay that out, maybe you crop it a little bit, and off you're going.
Right.
You don't have to worry about 4-color separation anymore.
Thankfully, because I don't have the knowledge to do it that way. I mean, that was not something I learned at Purdue Engineering. So
Yeah.
I'm happy that it's a lot simpler now.
Yeah. The tools that you mentioned, I mean, we're familiar with them. We use them, of course, all 3 of us use them regularly. But they're all subscription with a pretty decent learning curve. So if you are somebody who's been listening and you are excited and from this podcast and decide that now is the time you're going to start working on your own book, what are some simpler tools that people can use if they want to do it themselves?
So, I mean, you totally do not need to have any of those tools. My first few years of business, I was not using those tools. I have kind of gradually started using these more professional tools. But so if you're on a Mac, I mean, Apple has third-party plugins in the Apple Photos app that you can take photos and drop them into that app in the Apple Photos from your Apple Photos library into a book publisher. So right there, it's already built in.
Well, that's kind of cool. Let me just ask you about that, because I have Apple Photos, but I've never gone out and looked at additional apps that tie into Apple Photos to do things like that. So when you get this other app, then so I'm trying to wrap my
I think
head
she's
around
asking, how does it work?
Yeah. So, I mean, are you still in Apple Photos, or when you kick off the app, then the app can look at the Apple Photo Library?
So right inside Apple Photos, at the very bottom, there's a section called Projects.
Huh.
And it says My Projects, and you can add, you click the little plus sign, and you can click on that, and it says you've got options. You can select a book, a calendar, a card, wall decor. And so when you click on those, then there's the little expandable menu, and the book publisher that you've loaded in through a plugin will be there. And so you click on that one. So on this particular project, I have an MPix as one of the vendors. So if I click on that, I can take photos from this past weekend, because I was at a big fun party in Cleveland. I can take those photos and drag them from my library just down a little bit lower on my Apple Photos app and put them into this new project that I just launched.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you have to go through the whole layout process.
Oh, yeah.
It takes out that one step. So I actually don't traditionally do my books on my Apple computer, because most of my photos are on my PC. And so what I do there, or what I used to do before I started using Lightroom, is that I would go through my year and create a new folder for photos for book. And I would drag or copy photos from my year into these are the photos I've selected, and create just a special folder. And then I would upload all the photos from that folder into a book publisher. So there's so many consumer-based book publishing companies out there, and the ones that consumers could use are different than what I use for my clients. But I mean, there's MPix, like I just said, is one of the plugins for Apple, and there's Xeno, which is another one that I've used for myself, Milk Books, Artifact Uprising, and there's a ton of good book publishers out there. And you don't need any special tools because they have templates built into their programs.
Nice.
So, I mean, like I use InDesign because I like to create my own templates, but nobody has to do that. If you want to do this on your own, there are companies, professionals who have already done this work for you, where the templates are there and they've got embellishments if you're into that sort of thing, kind of a scrapbooky look. So there are all these companies that already have this and that have done it to make it so much easier for the everyday consumer to design their own books.
Yeah.
Some of
So
those,
if people have different software that they manage their photos in, so for example, like Lightroom, that was where I did my first book because Lightroom had the book option as one of the tools in Lightroom. And that worked really well for me until I started using more professional tools. So I still use Lightroom, but then I take them into other book layout programs that give me more fluid options.
and one thing, so you both mentioned, essentially creating a folder of favorites and going from there, but just so everyone's clear, on pretty much every photo platform, if you're Apple, if you're Google, if you're in Amazon, wherever your photos are, just create an album within that program. And when you are going through and finding photos, or hopefully in advance, you do it and just stick them in that album. And it's a lot easier than it used to be, because you're right. It used to be that you had to essentially make a copy. So you're making another copy of your photo and sticking it into a different folder, and it's very clunky. But on today's phones and things, just make a virtual album and stick stuff in there. The other thing you mentioned, and you mentioned this early on, that you keep the JPEGs or the PDFs of your books so you can reprint them later. One thing that I have always told people for the last while, and it was like a light bulb that went off in my head a couple of years ago with books, is I always design square. And the reason for that is literally what you said, so that if I've got these and 5 years from now I want to reprint them, and the printer went out of business, the original one, if you design a square, and I think all photo companies offer that in their own design software, then you can print it anywhere.
And we're talking about 8x8, 10x10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Allison kindly brings this up because she and I had this conversation, and I was doing the layout for the wedding book that I previously mentioned. And I personally love the landscape look. And so, numerous books that I've printed for myself or for friends or for clients has been the, more of the 12x8 or 10x8 or whatever the math works out to. I am not an engineer. And
Lida probably wouldn't have this problem because she could just in her head figure out how they go from one to the other.
Calculators help too.
But so I approached Allison because I started this layout in this particular tool that you have to predetermine who your printer is and what the book style is. And they offer many different print book levels, quality levels. So you have to even narrow it down to is it an album or a book with this company? And, in my hurried moment to try and create the book, I went down this path, and then I was like, well, that wasn't the book I wanted. And I said, so I asked Allison, can I take my images and use, this company, but print it on a different plan or product level? And she's like, that's why I do square pages. So now she's on a mission to let everybody know.
But Lida, do you have a favorite?
So it's really funny. I 100% agree and understand the whole 10x10, 12x12 scalability. I personally really love landscape books for travel and my year in review books. And I'd say that I'm probably 50-50 on landscape versus square. There's just something to be said about, the size and the way it opens up. My wedding books almost always are square, and that's for two reasons. One, the scalability, but sometimes the bride and groom want to get an extra copy at a smaller version for family members. And so you can do a a companion book, and you can size it up and down. Some of the other landscape books, they can scale if you're staying within the same proportions. And I usually design in the biggest one so that it would just have to scale down. But I had that issue, Susan, where I was designing in InDesign, but I was going to export my JPEGs to this other printer.
Yeah.
And I looked up the dimensions for their album, not their book, or for their premium book, not their classic book. And I was off. And I had to go and resize like 150 pages. And I cussed at myself and I was cranky and I was mad. And then I poured myself a glass of wine and everything was good. So it sucks. It really does. But for me, what was important was I really wanted that landscape book. And it was my mistake. And it was for a client. And they loved it. And I learned my lesson.
Yeah. So there's a moral there, actually. So even if you're doing it yourself, think about before you start. So you started by selecting your photos and all that, but think about what size you want before you start, and look at where you're going to print it and make sure they have that. And because you don't want to have to redo it. Like I said, if you don't like square, because square works, but if you like a landscape, just make sure that you're actually looking at the options, because probably all of the do-it-yourself companies out there also still have different sizes, and they have different levels of quality. They have different paper types. But the most important thing probably when you're starting is to check the size.
Right. Because if the type of cover that you want and the lay flat or not is not in your size, then you have to take your time and redesign the layout. And that can be time consuming, especially when you've got it just perfect. And so that's where I was at. But everything turned out great in the end. I figured out what I was actually signed up to get, and I got that book for them, and it worked great and they loved it. So
the other thing you just mentioned, the lay flat, 100% lay flat is the way to go. It's a type of hinging that allows a page to go seamlessly from left to right without a little bulge. It makes a really big difference in all sorts of photo books, but especially travel books when you've got a beautiful landscape that you want to spread across. I've had, landscapes of Antarctica or Paris, or there's some beautiful vistas. And when you have it across the page, you don't want that bulge. So my recommendation to anyone listening is, when you are deciding on a book, whether it's a big book, a little book, choose the lay flat pages. And there's hinged lay flat and seamless lay flat. I'm indifferent between those two because I think that they both show the photos in a similar way, but do choose lay flat binding over traditional binding.
And that's really important, especially when you've got the beautiful scenery, the panorama that you want to spread on 2 pages. But not only that, you also, when you have a group shot, if you've ever done a family reunion, and, ultimately, where do they put the person of the moment? In the middle.
Yeah, don't do that.
So, you don't want the seam going down, their left or right shoulders, or,
and with less expensive,
heaven forbid, right down the middle of their face. So
less expensive printers, you take the one going through their face, and the left side of the page will be a little higher than the right side of the page. I've seen that too.
Yeah, no, I try to keep people out of the seam.
So I've recently did a birthday book for someone celebrating their birthday, and they gave me the group shot from the professional photographer. And in order to make sure that the person that had the birthday was not in the center seam, I had to actually resize the image so that when it went into the book, I had room to shift it. Yeah. Does that make sense? Left to right? Yeah. So that helps when you have extra photography skills and Photoshop skills.
So let's we're getting closer to the end here. We've talked a lot about kind of tips to get started, but they've been a little bit scattered. So could you, Lida, maybe you can sum up for us, just if you don't know where to start, how do you get going? We've talked about some of them,
Yep.
but if you could put it all together for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like I'm going to be just the broken record. Start with favoriting. It's such an easy way to get a handle on your photos is to just start the favorite process of your photos. That way, you know which photos you like the most, and those are the ones that likely would end up in a book. Then the next best step that I think would be helpful would be to decide on a project and make a commitment to getting that project done. So we sometimes set these goals for ourselves, and like I mentioned, that that mom who's got 4 kids and is going to do their baby books from 0 to 18 and get it done. That is not a realistic goal. So set a realistic goal and commit to that. You don't have to be anal like me and write out steps of what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. But if you put it out there, I'm going to, tomorrow I'm going to spend half an hour while I'm in the carpool lane or while I'm in the grocery store waiting. I'm just going to start favoriting my photos. Start there and then say, okay, I really want to make a holiday book. We had an awesome holiday this past winter. Let's go and make a holiday book. So those would be the first 2 things to do. To me, it's more of a mindset. Once you make that commitment, the technical side, it's not a very technical thing to do. You pick your photos, you pick your vendor, you get them in. It's making that commitment and saying, I want this and I'm going to make it happen.
So I have a question. Are there books that are better for long-term, like archival quality versus something that,
like printer wise?
Yeah. I mean, is that something that people should look at? Or, if you get a book printed anywhere, you should be good? Because I know there's a huge variance in some of these, commercial companies that your average person might, use. I'll just say, like Shutterfly or some of these. There's a lot of difference in pricing and quality. And so sometimes when you tell someone what you charge to do the layout, and then on top of that, what you're going to charge for the printing,
Right.
People
Right.
can't see you right now, but you have a big smile on your face and you're nodding heavily. So, I know for me that, I've even created photo books that mimic a photo album so that we can downsize that photo album and have it be more portable and certainly safer for the images, because now they're out of that photo album, potentially with the, acid papers and everything ruining the images. They're out of that photo album and into a nicely designed photo book. But what else should I consider?
Well, I think papers are definitely an important factor. And a lot of these vendors, when you go to their website, they've got the FAQs, they've got their guarantees that we are printing on acid-free paper, this is archival paper. And what's funny is you don't necessarily realize it when you're looking at it. I don't have that discerning eye. We have some photo managers that can really see the differences in coloring and all that. I don't have that eye, but I'm a textile person, so I can feel it. And I've had some books printed where you can feel the texture of the paper, and it doesn't have to be that heavyweight cardstock. I'm talking just regular paper. The thing is, we do these books so that we can have these stories and this history of our family and this legacy that we can potentially hand down from one generation to the next. Yes, it costs a lot, but if you stretch that cost, you do this book this year, 2021, I designed it once. I'm not going to design 2021 again and again and again. It's worth it because it's going to last the next 30, 40, 50 years. That book is going nowhere. I printed it with a higher end printer because I want it to last. But I'm going to go back to my original thing. Done is better than perfect. And if someone can't afford to go with a high end printer and they just want it done, slap those photos into a book and just have them printed, do it. It doesn't have to be a super high-end book. Yes, I would love to treat my clients to these beautiful final products, but it's not for everyone.
It's
Yeah.
definitely a consideration when we go, and it doesn't, every book you do is different. So personally, when we go on vacation, I love to travel. I love to find, kind of far off places, spend a lot of time and energy in planning the trip and doing the trip and blah, blah, blah. When I get home, it's totally worth it to me to spend more on a nice book. And I actually add it into my budgeting for the trip. When I've done other books, like for my kids, it's been a little while since I've done them. Honestly, those are actually lesser quality when I print them because personally, for me, and everybody's different, but for me, the travel books are the ones that I keep. And those include all the pictures of the kids too, of course. But I don't actually care so much about, don't tell my kids this. I know they don't listen to this podcast, so I'm not that worried. But I never ever look back at their baby books, their first 5 years or whatever. I just don't. But our travel books, I look at all the time. So you don't have to, it's not all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Right.
decide what's important to you. And for a lot of people, it's probably the opposite of what I just said. And it's their kids and the year in the life that's more important. Well, you pick out those or your wedding, spend a little bit more on that, and others that you really want to have the book, but maybe it's less important. Go for a cheaper paper, a cheaper printer, and you'll still love your book.
Right.
I did a very inexpensive book. I got a coupon. This was before I started my business years ago. And I made a first year book for my great niece, my nephew's daughter. And she loves it. She picks it up off the shelf and she looks at it, and she's just 5 now. So she loves looking at her baby pictures. And so, to her, it's very important. I don't know how often the dad, has looked at it, but, to her, it's something fun, and it's all about her. So, yeah, I think you just have to figure out who the book is for and whether, I like your idea, Allison, of putting that book cost into your travel vacation budget. I think that's smart. Yeah,
We
great.
do, we spend a lot of money. If we're spending a lot of money on a vacation, this is pennies.
Yep.
And it helps us remember. So we spend a lot of money on a vacation, we go on the vacation and we love it. 5 years from now, the book will help us remember why we loved it so much. And for me, that is absolutely priceless.
Well,
So
and the other
that's
thing,
what I
like
do.
we go on vacations or people go on vacations, and they buy these trinket souvenirs that they use for, keychain or a shot glass or a t-shirt. And it kind of loses its fizzle after the first few months of being home from that vacation. But the book, that lasts forever. I mean, you have that on your coffee table. And when you're in dreary Chicago and you're thinking about the warm weather of Patagonia and you're thinking, gosh, I wish I could go hiking or snorkeling or whatever. I mean, you sit down, you go, oh, look at that. Oh, we got to plan another vacation. So
I want to walk around Rome again.
yeah,
That's actually the dangerous part, is because I keep the books out, I'm constantly in my head. I'm already doing it. We just came home and I'm already planning the next one. Okay, so we're getting towards the end here, and this is the question we ask every guest because it's fun. But what is the strangest photo in your own collection? And bonus question for you, is it in one of your books?
So I am a pretty conservative person, so I don't really have very strange photos, but there's a story here. When my dad passed away, my cousin came up to me and asked if he could take photos at the services. And I was like, okay, that's a little weird. Like, I've heard of people taking pictures at weddings and happy occasions. This is a sad occasion. Why would you want to do that? But I was like, okay, you can roll with it. So he's snapping away pictures. I'm, in my own world because it's, my services, the visitation, the funeral, everything. So a week or two later, he sends me the photos and I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these. So I put them in a folder, and my photos are very organized, like date and occasion. Well, it was just the date because I know what's on that date and I did not need to put in a description of what it was. Well, then fast forward, I finally got around to doing my 2016 book, and I came across those photos and I was like, what do I do with these? And I'm like, do I put them in the book? And I made the decision that yes, I will. So I have a page. It's not a spread, it's just a page. It's very tactfully done, but it's labeled, our final goodbye. And there's a picture of me holding my daughter when she was 5 while I was giving the eulogy. She ran up to me while I was up there and I was getting all emotional, and she comes up and there's a picture of me holding her. And like I see them like, that's right. She was my rock. She came up to me, and then it was like the coldest February day when we buried him, and my kids are running around in snow pants. And there's a picture of that in the book. And as hard as that day was, and as hard as it is to look at that page, it's part of our life, like there's happy days and there are sad days, and it's in our book. So I'm actually getting emotional, but so it's not a really strange thing, but it's not something that you would normally see in a photo book. And I oscillated back and forth. Do I include this? And I was like, yeah, this is our life, and I'm going to have it. And I didn't want my kids to think it's taboo because nobody wants to talk about death. But death and photos, they go together. And I decided to keep the photos. My mom and my sister were not happy about the photos from that day.
Aw, yeah.
I was okay, and I appreciate the fact that he did that. And it was our final goodbye, and I can remember it. So
Yeah, that's a sweet story, huh? You got me emotional.
We're all sitting here tearing up.
yeah, good thing that there's no video.
There's no video.
No video.
And we've talked about death in photos before. So that's, yeah. I love that. That's why we like to ask that question, because I think it brings out photos aren't just, they're not always happy and that they're literally a snapshot of our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And again, we will forget about those moments. And so get it in there, talk about it, look at them, let the tears fly. I mean, it's
Yep.
okay. It's okay to be emotional. So, yeah.
Well, this has
Thank you.
been amazing. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. I could talk about photo books for hours and hours and hours. So bore you all to death.
And we have, and I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. And we'll put all of your information, Lida, into our show notes. So people looking for Lida or want to learn more about her and her business, which I'm still not going to mispronounce publicly on this show. We'll put it all in the show notes so you can see them after you've listened. And it's at insidephotoorganizing.com.
Well, thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah. And I learned a few things, which is always good, as we say. Got to learn something.
Yeah. All righty. Thank you, Lida.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Well, another wonderful interview.
Yeah, I always love talking to Lida, and I am lucky enough that we don't live that far apart. So she and I get to talk a lot, and that's why we really wanted to have her on, because she knows so much about photo book design and just the start to finish. You could tell, when she's giving her tips and her process and things.
Yes, for sure. Very knowledgeable. And I enjoyed the fact that she is not, she's more interested in ensuring that people create these books for their families. And, if you want to hire her, hire us, that's great. But she really wants to empower people to, to start favoriting those photos. And when you're ready to sit down, you've got them ready to go. And I think that's the important thing, taking notes along the way. I love doing that when I travel, like you said. And it can become such a lovely, thing to have in your collection. And whether you're downsizing, you want to create photo books of previous photo albums, that's another option that you can do. Some people have scrapbooks and they want a scrapbooky feel of their photo book. So yeah, there's so many ways you can slice and dice this, but to have something done so professionally and with her engineering background, I am sure it is a marvel. just a marvelous book that she creates.
Yeah, they are beautiful. And it really, like, I love when people make books, and I encourage people when they do them too to leave them out, put them out on the table. And the nice thing is too, is I don't know, if somebody spills something on it, you can always reprint it. The hard part is making it in the first place. It's not the printing.
Yeah.
So put it out, enjoy it. You made all these memories. So let's keep them at the forefront. So I'm really glad we had that episode, and people ask about books all the time. So now they've got a little bit of a reference or a place to start, because she had some great tips.
Yeah, that was awesome. Well, next we want to talk about a question that was submitted to us from our listening audience. Her name is Carlene, and she's reaching out to us from Michigan. And her question is, I am not a certified photo manager. Oh, well, we love the fact that you're listening to our podcast. So thank you for that. So she goes on to say, but I have been listening to as many webinars and podcasts that I have time for. Can you break down how much money you spend a month or year for your photo organization? Or more specifically, what software and backup you set up for your clients and how much it costs? Do you have them pay for software like PhotoSweeper, monthly iCloud, or other cloud backup? What about external hard drives? If they don't have a computer, buy one. I can envision that it is a monthly bill that people would have to include in their budget for the rest of their life. Allison, you want to start off?
This is, obviously this is a huge question. But what I would say on the base is photos are a little bit of an investment. You have to keep them somewhere. I mean, you don't have to keep all of them, but you need to think about what you want to do with them. And do you want to keep everything that you take? Because that could be an awful lot. And if you do that and you have a really large collection, you'll go in one direction as to where you ultimately keep your photos. If you have a much smaller curated collection, then you would choose a different type of solution. And I only mention that because the costs are quite different. If you have 5 terabytes of photos, which a project I just picked up has about 18 terabytes they just gave me, you are not going to put that on a place where you're paying, you might not want to put it on a place where you have to pay for storage up front, because
cloud storage
up front, because it's a ton of money. So you might instead keep that local. You might make it a goal to curate that down much, much smaller. So to calculate actual monthly bills from not knowing how you keep your photos is a little bit impossible. I will say with software, you mentioned PhotoSweeper. That's something for me anyway. I own it. I own all the software that I use with clients. They don't need to have it. But what they do need to have is either a hard drive. And if you're getting say a 2 terabyte drive, that's, I don't know, $100. Replace it every few years. You want to have a few of them. So that's a little bit. Or if you're keeping it on the cloud, you've got your subscription costs. There's a lot of different ways you can go with it. So the first thing to do is actually figure out, what do you actually need? What do you actually want? And then do some comparisons. I will say, and then I'm going to turn it to Susan because she'll have ideas as well, that I never, ever, ever store my photos and my memories in a free anything. And I am emphatic about that, because they have no reason to keep your stuff safe. And they don't have to inform you if they're going out of business, or if they change their policies, they'll probably tell you, but they have no requirement from their end that they have to keep your stuff. If you keep it somewhere paid, be it iCloud or Forever or Permanent, or there's a bajillion different places you can put it, they have a responsibility to you. So you will have a much better experience and are much less likely to lose your things than if you put it somewhere free. If it's free, they're getting something out of it, and that is going to be to your detriment. So if you forget, if you remember nothing from this last piece of this episode, it is not safe to keep your photos in a free solution. Susan?
No, I completely agree. And in addition, if you have paid someone to help you organize, they're going to do some things like perhaps add event data into the metadata. They may be doing face tagging, face recognition. So there's names in the keywords. We may have added captions for you. And depending on where you store that, that's not always easy to get back. So I know there was a conversation recently. It comes up about Shutterfly and how easy it is to make products with photos on that platform, which it is. But it probably is not the best place for you to store your photos, because when you want to get your photos out, it's not always easy, straightforward, and you lose that metadata. So yeah, we can talk all day about different options. We would want to find out, as Allison had said, what your particular situation is with your photos. Are you PC or Mac? That really wasn't mentioned. You did mention Photo Sweeper, so I'm guessing maybe a Mac, because that's Mac based only. But that program's only $10 and it's designed to remove duplicates. So once you do that, you don't really need that software anymore. And if you are on an Apple device, Apple Photos has recently included a duplicate remover. It does not remove similars. That would be something like, what Allison mentioned earlier, when you hand your phone to somebody and you say, here, take a photo of our family in front of this, monument or whatever. And they give you 10 in a row. So that is considered a series of photos. They're not considered the same photo, but you don't need to keep them all. So once you have curated your library, then you can talk about what your ongoing costs would be.
Yeah, it depends on the size of your library and what you want to do with it. I've got, 10,000 photos of birds. No one's going to want those. So I don't put them in a place where it's expensive to store. I have them on my hard drive and I have them on something else, but you really have to think about that. So it's not easy to put an actual price tag on it. What I would say is that these are, maybe I'm only saying this because I'm a photo organizer, but I consider photos and videos, that kind of media, one of the most precious things that I own. And for that reason, I am willing to pay small monthly fees or whatever to keep them safe. And I think that gets lost sometimes, because there used to be a lot more free solutions, and a lot of them are gone, or a lot of them have started charging, and a lot of people got into a big old mess when they disappeared because they lost their photos. So think about how important they are to you and your budget, and pick what's going to work. Yeah. But remember, once they're gone, they're gone.
Yeah, and that's the hardest thing to come to peace with. And that's why I also have a network attached storage, multiple hard drives, and lots of photo backups, because that is very important to me. And, if you look at, like, I just grabbed a screenshot very quickly of iCloud storage, and you get 50 gigs for just 99 cents a month. So you can get 200 gigabytes for like $3 a month. And I think, that's less than a coffee. You go to Starbucks and you're paying $5 potentially daily for that. So I guess.
And two terabytes, which will cover most people, is $10 a month. And I think it's similar on Google, and, they're all kind of about the same. And Susan's right. If you go get a coffee, so even that, I would argue, I don't drink coffee, so I don't go into Starbucks all that often, but I'm guessing that they're probably potentially close to $10, or if you get two of them, they're, so think about it that way. It makes the cost easier to handle.
Yep, exactly. Well, we appreciate hearing from our audience. If you have a question, please let us know. It would just warm our hearts to help you figure out something that has been bugging you, or you need some clarity on, or just maybe a suggestion on a particular project that you're working on. Maybe it's a photo book.
Maybe, or a topic that you want us to talk about.
Yes.
shoot us an email from our, the contact form on the website. And who knows, maybe we'll do a whole show on it.
So I just want to add something. I'm very excited. We are going to Roots Tech.
We're both going. Of course, this episode will air after we've come back. So we will have just come back. No, we'll be there.
Yes,
we'll be there when this comes out.
Yeah. But
so that'll be fun. Susan and I together in the flesh, and we'll have to get a picture and we'll put it somewhere on the podcast page.
Yes. And maybe we can talk about our experience at Roots Tech for our next episode.
Maybe we can. I love it. We can talk about it in person. Figure that out.
I'll bring my nice microphones and we'll have a good time.
Well, you're driving, so you can. I'm not bringing my big microphone.
Oh, no, I'm flying.
Oh, you are? Okay.
I decided 7 hours in the car wasn't for me.
Yeah, I could see that. Through the mountains.
Yeah. Well, if I went through Colorado, it'd be 9 plus, depending on the weather. And this is the end of February. And February and March are our snowiest months. So when Lida said that she had the big snowstorm in March, I'm like, yep, that's typical.
Yeah. Well, you'll be a lot safer. I was a little concerned about you driving through the mountains, but I wasn't going to say it. You are in Colorado, so you know how to do it. But I'm thrilled you're coming so that we can hang out in person, and we're going to have a good time. And yeah, I think we'll probably talk about it on our next episode.
That will be fun. All right, my dear. Until next time.
Great. Have a great day, Susan.
Thanks, you too. Bye for now. That's it for our show today. Remember, you can find this episode on all of your favorite podcast apps. Be sure to click follow so you can stay up to date with the latest in photo organizing. We'll catch you next month.